Hi, everyone, and welcome to Talk the Talk. I'm Alexandra Feingold, Campaign Manager for Clean Speech. Clean Speech is a 30-day detox to empower people to speak more mindfully through short daily videos with Jewish tools for mindful speech. We have over 50 participating organizations, schools, and synagogues, and over 3,000 people who challenged themselves to speak more positively this past year. Today, I'm so excited to be discussing mindful speech with Aleeza Ben Shalom, a dating coach, speaker, author, star of Netflix's Jewish Matchmaking, and founder of Become Your Own Matchmaker course that's launching this week. Thank you so much for being here, Aleeza.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you.
So why don't we start off just talking about how your Netflix show came about?
So there was a show called Indian Matchmaking, and it came out during the pandemic, and it was really popular. And I watched it, and I was like, oh, because I got to watch everything dating related, you know? And I watched it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is just like the Jewish matchmaking. It's the same thing, but it's just with Indians. This is incredible. It would be unbelievable if we had this with Jewish matchmaking. And a few months later, I got a phone call. Hi, we're looking to do a show with Jewish matchmaking with the same production company. And I started doing interviews, and thank God it worked out.
Wow. Were you ever worried that with reality shows, things so often can be sensationalized and people can be portrayed in like not always the best light? What was your thought process about doing a reality show at the risk of having people maybe embarrass themselves or gossip about one another? And how did you approach that?
It was absolutely a concern of mine. And in general, when I'm looking for the support that I need, I want to have behind the scenes support, side by side in front of the scenes, so to speak. So for me, it was really important that we had a frum producer that was on with us. There was another Jewish producer that was in the field with us. And I had support from, my personal larger community in terms of what the goals were and what we were hoping to represent. But the truth is anything can happen, as they say, on the cutting room floor. You never know what gets left there and what gets added in. So all I knew was that I presented myself in a way that I would be happy to be represented. And I was hoping that that would translate well, which thank God it did.
Were there any surprises that like caught you off guard after the show, or could you tell us about a time that you had to step in and ask the producers not to show certain footage that portrayed someone more negatively on the show?
I think that there's always a dynamic of what do we represent, what do we show, and how do we do it. Behind the scenes, we have a from producer, Ronit Pullen, and she was really incredible. She was the one that was able to do everything behind the scenes, and I wasn't really behind the scenes. I was in front of the camera, and so I didn't have that perspective as much as she did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So talking about mindful speech a little bit, as a matchmaker, you obviously have to find out a lot of information about the people that you're setting up. You probably make and receive tons of reference calls about people. How do you deal with having to talk about people without letting that turn into negative speech? And where do you strike that balance between needing to find out who one of your clients really is and avoid hearing negative speech about them?
So it's actually very challenging, as you can imagine. There are times where obviously we're not allowed to say something, but what people don't usually realize is that there's times where we are actually obligated to say something. When you're going into a personal relationship or a professional business partnership, in the same way, there are times where a person might be obligated to actually share information. It has to be done where we are completely guarding our speech, where we are observing all of the laws of Shmiras HaLashon, and where we have a consciousness of what we're doing and why we're doing it. So just for example, I'm not excited ever to share any information that wouldn't be positive about somebody, but if it's information they need to know, not that it's negative information, but it's just another piece of information that will help somebody to make a decision, and it's a piece of information that's very relevant to their circumstances. It's a little, you hear how I'm talking about it, and it's a little uncomfortable. It's a little bit of a dance, and there is a lot of internal work that has to be done as we're going through each thing. Did I meet the criteria? Do I know this? Is this firsthand information? Is this second? Is this third-hand information? How do I know this information? Why am I sharing this information? Am I allowed to even be sharing this information? If I am allowed, or if I am obligated, what specifically am I obligated? How much do I tell? How little do I tell? In what way do I say it? there's all of these nuances where what you say or what you don't say, or even how your facial reaction might be to a certain situation, is going to be very telling about what you think about something. And it's complicated.
Definitely. I noticed on the show you had to be very non-judgmental and very accepting and open to anything that your clients might say because you don't want to come off a certain way.
I didn't have to be that way. That is who I am. If you would
Good.
have had somebody else as the matchmaker on the show, they would have reacted differently for sure. Right? What you really saw is Aleeza and is Aleeza's reaction, and my way of being non-judgmental, which is not non-judgmental for the sake of non-judgmental. It's for the sake of understanding, accepting who somebody is, and trying to work with them at the level that they're at, is who I am. But not everybody operates like that. That is something that is more unique to me.
Mhm.
And I think that some people might, you could have had a different matchmaker say, listen, that's nice. I don't really buy into this whole thing. I don't think I can help you. They would have actually showed that if that's what was there. But what was unique about me is that I just listened, I received, I tried to, in some cases, give them what they requested, or I tried to stretch them a little bit, saying, I know this isn't exactly what you're looking for, but let's try to do something a little bit different and get different results. Are you open to that? And trying to stretch them in that way. So that's like the Aleeza magic, not what anybody would have done.
It was amazing because we got to see such a wide variety of people from all different backgrounds and Jewish practices. So that was really unique to you. Yeah, exactly. And let's say, so for example, you mentioned that you have to discern when you're going to say what about someone, when you find out information about someone you're working with that's kind of negative, and it is important that it be communicated to the person that they're dating. How do you know how to say it in a way that's not offensive? So let's say there was someone that you were working with who had serious red flags. They were unstable emotionally, or they had a bad temper. How can you communicate that? How would you communicate that?
To share that with my client, is that what you're saying?
To share that with someone that you were potentially setting them up with and thought that maybe they should know that there are red flags, for example.
Yeah. So if there were red flags, I probably wouldn't set it up. But let's just say they're already dating and then these red flags come up later and maybe we didn't know about those things. I would start a conversation by asking, not telling. So I first would want to know, how did you feel on the date? Was there anything that made you specifically comfortable or specifically made you uncomfortable? I would start to ask questions so that somebody could have a process of self-discovery before I ever need to say anything, because it's possible that what I know, the other person already knows and is already feeling, and I don't necessarily have to say it very straightforward to them. I can ask them questions and they can respond back to me and say, actually, I was very uncomfortable when they ordered their third drink on our second date. And I definitely didn't want to get in the car and drive home with him at that point. Right. And then we can say, okay, so what did you do? How did you handle that situation? And she can say, either I got in the car with him, I called a taxi, I ended the date. I'm not sure if I should go out again. Right. It leaves us with the opportunity to open a discussion once I ask questions. So that's one of the ways that I do it. Before I would ask something and see if my client had information that they already knew and kind of help them to flesh that out.
Right. Okay. So making it more of an open discussion rather than overtly saying whatever the questionable behavior is.
If there was a time where I had a client once and she said, he's drinking on the dates and he's smoking on the dates and he's smoking other stuff on the dates. And I don't know. I mean, her comment was, I guess that's just what people do. And I, in my head, I went, oh, this is not a red flag for her. This is not a trigger. So I said to her, okay, so can I give you a little bit of perspective? First, I asked permission. Can I give you perspective? She says, yes. Now she's open. Great. Then I say, let me just tell you about my experience in having worked with dozens or hundreds or thousands of people. The behavior that you're describing is either A, within a range of norm, or actually outside of a range of normal. And here's why. Normally or typically what you might see is X, but what we're seeing is something different. Right. And then I want to see again, is there anything for him or her? Is there anything that's coming up? Are they going, oh, I didn't realize that. Oh, that's not in a range of normal. And then I want them to say, I want it to come from them. Is that a red flag? I want them to have that aha moment, because it's
Right.
so much more powerful when they realize it than when I tell them. Because if I just say, well, to me, that's a red flag, they might say, well, to me, it's not. And that's really the end of the discussion. So how I have a conversation with somebody is very important, because it's their own internal understanding, which is going to lead them to whatever action they want to take. And I personally don't have an agenda, so to speak. I have one agenda. Yes, I want to help you get married to the right person. And I don't have a preference which person that is, because the right person is the right person. So if it doesn't work out with this person, I'm okay, because we're going to find the right person, and then that person wasn't the right person. So I'm less attached to the person and to the outcome with this situation, and more attached to the overall outcome, which is you want to find your person. I'm invested. Let me help you do that. But I want to make sure you can live with that person for a lifetime. And you can't always do that with people who have significant red flags.
I think two really important and applicable things that you just spoke about for people who are engaged in our campaign and who are actively working on speaking more positively and mindfully is to come in with no agenda to conversations. Because when you have an agenda, then that's when negative speech starts happening. That's when you have motives and you're trying to steer a conversation a certain way, or promote your own agenda a certain way. And how you start those conversations that could be more uncomfortable with a question like, are you open to feedback? Are you open to my opinion? That's just such a good takeaway for anybody who wants to know how they can engage in talking about like uncomfortable conversations or other people. First, asking permission. Are you open to hearing my feedback? I think that's a really important thing. Also, in watching your show, one thing I noticed is that your role is so far beyond just setting people up. You coach people through the process, and anyone in dating knows there's so many ups and downs, and people get so frustrated and they want to give up on that they'll ever find the right person. How do you use your words to keep people hopeful?
That's one of my specialties. And that's something that if you ask, like, of all the things that you do, what's one of the best things that you do? That is one of the best and greatest things that I do. I've had people say to me, Aleeza, I don't know if there's somebody out there for me, but you seem to think there's somebody out there for me. So
Wow.
I'm going to keep trying, and I'm just going to bank on your hope, because you have a greater connection and vision to this than I do, and I can't even see it happening. So for me, two things. One, it's the way that the world was created. It's the blueprint of creation. I come into the world, my partner comes into this world, we play a little bit of where's Waldo, where's my soulmate, we go and we find them, we get married, yay. If it doesn't work out, or if somebody passes away, God forbid, we have the opportunity to recouple and find our new soulmate. So it's not like you get one chance and it's one and done. The way that the world was created is that our person is here. If we choose to marry them, great, that's our person. If we choose to pick somebody else, that becomes our person. And that's how we make soulmates. So I have a firm belief that a person is in this world. That's number one. Number two, the second thing that I know is that lots of different types of people get married. Because if you look out into the world and you see tall people, short people, skinny people, fat people, English speakers, non-English speakers, it just doesn't matter if you have a job, if you have no job. Lots of people get married. So when everybody tells me, oh, I'm a tough case, I'm the toughest case you've ever seen, I'm like, right, probably not. But okay, we could talk. And even if you are, so tough cases get married too. Why
Right.
is that a barrier? So unless you think it's a barrier and you don't feel like getting married, okay, so you won't get married. But it's the way that the world was created. We're supposed to couple up. We're supposed to find our partner. We're supposed to bring our relationship together with somebody else and build it. And that's just the way that the world was created. So I have a firm belief that this is how it's going to be. So and I see it happening all the time. As much as people are like, oh, but it doesn't happen for me. I said, until it does. And so what? In 2 weeks or 2 years, you're going to call me and be like, well, actually, I found my person. I'm going to go, I knew it was going to happen, because that's what happens. And sometimes it's 10 years and sometimes it's not 2. I don't make the timeline. That's up to God.
That's probably one of the most powerful switches, is getting people to talk to themselves positively throughout the dating process. Yes. And change their self-image to help them realize that you're not so special, that there's nobody out there for specifically you. Like a lot of people, one part of this campaign that we need to focus, that we want to focus more on, is self-talk, and getting people to realize that how you speak to yourself informs so much of your choices. And it's so important, especially in dating and relationships.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And vulnerability is something I've heard you speak a lot about in dating also before. It can be so hard to discern what to disclose and when, like we spoke about earlier? And how do you help people discern when the right time to disclose information about themselves is? Or if it's about their background, or if it's about their family, and it could potentially disclose information about them that may make them look less than flattering,
Right.
whatever it may be. Yeah. How do you discern when the right time in dating is to disclose that type of information? Is there a timeline?
Yeah, so there's a really delicate balance, and I don't go by a number of dates because it's irrelevant, because I work with secular people and religious people and everywhere all over. So I'm going to give you the understanding of it, and then every person has to apply it to their situation. You need to be dating a person enough that you're feeling kind of into it and they're feeling kind of into it, but not too much that you're in hook, line, and sinker and wow, this is my person. So the very beginning of a relationship, it's too soon. For date 1, date 2, date 3, it's new. I do not need to tell you all of my deep, dark secrets. I'm going to start to open up to you. I want to share information. I want to be vulnerable, but not super, super deep immediately. It's overwhelming. It's a lot of information. And a new relationship, I just need to know I like your face. I need to know I like your personality. I need to know that we have some things in common. I need to know that we're heading in a similar direction. Then you want to get deep, we can get deep. But when you get deep very fast, I'm going to call it, even though it's deep, it's superficially deep, because I don't even know if I can tolerate you. I don't even know if we have the base things in line with each other and that we're comfortable with each other, let alone something really deep. So it can be a false sense of connection if you say something too early. Now, on the flip side, if we start dating and I am in and I'm like, woo, this is my person. This is my person. I know this is my person. Wow, I am just in. It's too far. I have almost lost my free will because my mindset is you're for me and I'm for you, and I can't even see anything else. So when I get so far in that I don't have the ability to make a clear choice and a conscious choice, now it's a little bit too far. So we want that sweet spot that is right between I like you, but I'm starting to really like you, but not so much that I'm all in. And I'll give you just a range. For religious couples, it's usually closer to date somewhere between 4 to 7, depending on how long they're dating. If they're going to date on a really fast timeline, that could happen. For modern couples, it could be somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks. And for secular couples, it might not come until 2 to 3 months down the road, where they're really starting to share some much more intimate things, because they might date a little bit more slowly, or they might not be ready for the next thing because they're not rushing through a relationship, because they don't have that end goal with a timeline that's very fast. So it gives the relationship a longer time to develop, and we have the friendship and the connection and just the joy of the relationship that could happen much earlier without having to bring in such deep vulnerability.
And it's very scary for people to discern, like, what do I risk if I share this? Do you have to coach them on how to share it? Certain like secrets or things that could be less flattering for them in their backgrounds?
Yes, absolutely. The number one thing that people do, and this is totally related to guarding our speech, is that they talk down about themselves. So they're like, oh, no, I talk good about other people in the world, but about me, no, I'm honest, I'm real. And I was like, oh, honest and real means you're being really mean to yourself and you're just poo-pooing everything about you. I was like, ixnay on that. That's a no-no.
Especially on the date.
Yeah, you can't speak negatively about yourself. I'm not going to be interested in you if you're talking negatively about yourself.
Totally.
So when people talk about something, I just want it to be, informational and data oriented, and less about the emotional judgment. I'm going to give you an example. I had a client and he had a medical condition, and it wasn't as minor as I'm going to make up the situation. It wasn't as minor as like diabetes, which is a medical condition. Something that's more serious could be Crohn's or MS at a very mild version of it. Okay. Those are more intense. You have to deal with them. Although diabetes is daily, but you can live with that. The others, it's like, well, are you going to make it? Are you going to make it? We don't know. So, and the quality of life is different in terms of that. So, somebody who has that might look at themselves and go, oh, I have this condition, and who's going to want to marry me, and it's such a pain for me to have it. I don't want to put that on anybody else. How could I do that? And then they start to feel all of these feelings, and they start to have all of these thoughts. And the truth is that we have no idea how your partner is going to judge us. Maybe they have a sibling or a best friend who has the same condition, and they're like, oh, I know how to deal with that. Maybe it's actually not a big deal to them because their father is a doctor, and he's like, oh yeah, we know how to handle that. Or the mother is also in the medical industry, a doctor, a nurse, or whatever. And they know what to do with that condition, where they're like, I'm not afraid of it. So I personally, right, I have this thing, and I'm judging myself negatively and thinking, who's going to want me? And meantime, my partner's like, it's not a big deal. I've had people marry people who've had cancer. They had cancer. They had treatment. They're totally in remission. They haven't had it for 2, 3, 5, whatever years, but they had a serious condition and they had it taken care of, and people still marry them. So don't judge yourself.
If it's your soulmate, nothing's going to stop them from marrying you. That's your soulmate. And I think that's such a good rule of thumb, right? I think that's such a good rule of thumb to disclose any negative information, is to take the emotional charge out of it, stick to the data, stick to the information, and be objective about it.
Yeah, more like, listen, I've had this condition for the last 3 years. When I first got it, it was more intense. Totally have things under control. Everything's monitored by my doctor and medication. I'm regularly having checkups. I haven't had a flare up in 2 years. I've been in great condition. If you didn't know I had something, you probably wouldn't know. Well, that's really helpful. Or you could say, actually, I've had this condition for the last decade. It comes on and off and in waves. Totally figured out how to manage it. Maybe once a year it'll get in the way of my daily routine and my daily life. But in general, I've completely managed it alongside of my doctor and whatever ABCD things that I am doing in my routine. However, you need to know, I need to A, eat healthy, B, get exercise, whatever is on the list. These are things that are really important to me. And I'm seeking a partner who's looking for that as well. Now I just related it back to why this is relevant for you to even know the information, because my partner is going to be on board with handling our lives together in a way that works for me.
And then they're able to trust you more because you were so honest and you listed the problem, but you also listed why it's relevant to them, how you're managing it, managing expectations about it, and what your future expectations are for it. So you kind of ended on a positive note.
Right. And the other thing is, we shouldn't say, there's not too much that's a yay and not too much that's a boo, right? It shouldn't be like, oh my gosh, it's fine. It's no big deal. It just doesn't matter. I mean, I have something, but it doesn't matter. Now I don't trust you because I don't even know what you have. And I don't know if you know what it is. And I don't know if you're being real. But we also shouldn't say like doom and gloom. I mean, unless it's a terminal illness and you're going to say, look, I've got 6 months. You want to spend 6 months together and that's it. Other than it being a terminal illness, we are able to manage this, and probably I'll live a long life, which will have, whatever going on in my life, but I'll have to manage it. And I'm looking for a partner who can handle that and, gets it. I get it. I know what I have to do for me. And I want a partner who is supportive, loving, and understanding. Does that work for you? Again, without the emotional charge of, for 10 years, I've been dealing with this and I only just got a handle on it now. And great. Tell that to your best friend. But on a date, they need data and information. Like you said, suck out the emotional information, because it's very hard to process when I'm emotionally feeling something for you when I don't even understand the data and information. I think that we can take it down to an emotional level later on. Early on, we need data and information and an understanding of what this even is.
Wow, it's so important. Just hearing you say that, the way you express that, it goes to show the power of how you say things, because two people could have the same illness or whatever it is, and the way that they communicate that on a date could be do or die with getting them a second date. Correct. It's so crazy. Yeah. Okay. So what are some signs that you look for when determining whether a couple has healthy communication?
Okay, so in terms of healthy communication, I like to see that we don't have spikes up and down. Okay, I've seen couples where they're like, oh my gosh, we love each other. It's amazing, except when it's not. And then it's really horrible. And they're like peaking out, up, down, up, down, up, down. Spikes in communication gaps are really problematic. I am looking also not for communication that just kind of is neutral and parv and middle of the road, which is like, oh, I like you, you like me. We just talk about daily things and everything's okay, because I don't think that we're communicating at a deeper or more intimate level. What I like to see is that a couple is communicating consistently and regularly over time. They're building a connection and they're kind of going up, although we're going to always dip down and have challenges along the way, but that we are getting higher and more connected as we're communicating. So I want to know that people start out just knowing each other and liking each other. And then I want people to really be curious about each other. That's something that's really important. Rabbi Yisrael Bernath, who's known as the Love Rabbi, he's very big into communication, but one of the key things in communication for him is curiosity. If I am no longer curious about you, do you want to know what's going to happen? Nothing, because I'm not going to ask you about you. You're not going to ask me about me. I'm going to talk about me. You're going to talk about you. And guess what's going to happen? We're going to have conversation, but it's not conversation. It's me talking and you talking, and there's nothing between us. And we need this thing to be together. The relationship is between you and me. That exists like a multicolored marble in the middle. I'm my color, you're your color. But when we come together, there's something beautiful that's really happening. And we can't do that without curiosity. We need to still, even I'm married to my husband for 20 years. I still need to be curious. I need to ask questions. I need to understand things that maybe I don't understand. And maybe when I hit like the 50-year mark, if I'd like to slow down in my curiosity, like I asked my in-laws who are married over 60 years, I was like, what do you still want to know? What are you still curious about? And my mother-in-law's like, no, I think we pretty well know each other. Like, we're good. Okay, fine. After 50 years, curiosity can slow down, but you still have to have playful and enjoyment and all of that. But really need to be curious about ourselves, our partners, people in the world. That's how we build relationships. And I think that's how we build a better communication.
Definitely. So curiosity and deepening the conversation throughout in a healthy way throughout the course of the relationship.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I think we only have time for one more question. So I want to talk a bit about lying that goes on during dating, whether it's being deceptive about their age, the person, how much they earn, or their history, their religious background. Why do you think people do this? And do you think it's ever appropriate?
Why do people do it? But one of the main reasons, I think, is because they don't see themselves as X. So if it's lying about age, look, I look younger. I had somebody just yesterday, they're like, I look so much younger. It's so deceptive. I said it is, but it's most deceptive to ourselves. We mostly look at ourselves going, no, I don't look that way, so I don't feel that way. So how could I say I am that age? And then they get stuck in a little bit of a lying loop, which is problematic. The other reason people do it is because of societal standards and norms, and there's a certain cutoff. So imagine you were in the market to buy a house and you had a certain budget, okay? You're only going up to $500,000, right? Okay, so at 501, nobody is going to see your listing. So people are going to list it at $499, even though they really want $525, because I want more people to be able to see it. And maybe we're going to stretch their budget and their preferences to see how, see if we can make that happen. So I think in the same way people do that with real estate, I think we do that with ourselves. It's kind of like, well, I'll put myself a few years younger. I mean, I'll own up to it. I'm going to tell them, but maybe once they get to know me, they're actually going to give me a chance, and it's not actually going to be a problem, which here's the problem, which isn't a problem. It works sometimes. So people have proof of concept, which is they did it and it worked. So why can't I do it? If you would have asked me this 10 years ago, I would have told you super red flag. It's really extremely problematic. And I'm not a fan because I'm very much a truth seeker. I'm a straight person. I'm a straight shooter. And it bothered me very much. I have been in this industry long enough and I've seen it happen enough. And I've seen enough successful relationships come out of it that I have a hard time saying it's absolutely inappropriate. And I also have other mentors, leaders, rabbinic guides that are telling people you should do this. So
you should lie.
Yes, you should tell them. Yeah, you should. You'll own up to it later, but on a dating profile or something else, you should lie, because otherwise you're not going to get the matches that you're looking for. So I have had enough people get approval that it's like the speed limit. It says 25 miles per hour. How many miles per hour do you go? You don't go 25, because if you do, the people behind you honk you. You go 35 or 40, no more than 45, like 20 miles over the speed limit, right? If you're racing down at 50, you have a problem. But we know there's a certain gap that makes sense. So Lying about your age 10 years, yeah, it's going to be a problem. Lying about your age 2 years, 3 years. I mean, I kind of have a rule of thumb. It goes like this. If a man in their mid 40s tells me that they're mid 40s, I just assume that they're 48 and 3/4. And they get offended when they're really only 47 and a half. But if you tell me mid 40s, in your brain, it's mid 40s, but you're actually closer to 50 than 40. But that's how people's brains work. So I kind of do my own mental adjustment, and for me, it's not a barrier anymore. It's just what it is. And my job is to just cut through the nonsense as quickly as possible. And so I just adjust. And I also tell other people, I'm like, well, they said mid 40s, probably means this. If they're younger than that, you'll be happy. If not, you won't be disappointed. I'm
shocked though that people are getting the okay to lie in dating. That's shocking.
Me too.
About age or about other things, like about anything?
Mostly it comes about age and height. Men will grow taller and women will shrink themselves shorter in order to fit into a certain category. It comes with age and height mostly. Religious level or things like that are very flexible and not so defined. So it's not like they're lying about that. They're just trying to figure out what term or what box fits them when no box really fits them. I think that age and height are probably the main things. Sometimes location, somebody will say, I'm living in California. And I was like, okay, great. Well, let's set you up. They're like, oh, well, I'm not there right now. Well, where are you? And they're like, oh, well, I mean, I'm in New York. I'm in the process of moving there. I was like, for how many years have you been in the process of moving there? Because I already know that I got their number. They're like, well, I mean, it's been the last 3 years, but I'm really serious about it this time. But I want to date there because I want to move there. I was like, okay, thanks. Now I know where you're at.
And from your perspective, you want the truth so that you can help them the best that you can. But you also think that this kind of lying is kind of a gray area. Sometimes it's okay. You've seen it work. You've seen it
I'm not going to say that it's okay. I'm going to say I've adapted to what's happening and I understand it. And I'm not in the Stone Ages where I think it doesn't exist. And if I run around going, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do this, it doesn't fix the problem. I learn how to navigate around the situation that's at hand. So if you don't know how to drive and there's snowy weather, you're just going to stay inside. But if you learn how to drive, you can handle any kind of weather. So for me, it's not whether I like it or I don't like it. It's here's what's happening in the world. We should always do our best to be honest, to be straightforward. We should just own our age and I always try to help people to own up to who they are. And if you're not going to do it, okay, so I'm smart enough to know how the world works, and I am going to set expectations so that my clients aren't going to get disappointed or freaked out when you're 6 years older than you said you are. I'm just going to prep them going, well, they said mid something. It probably means they're older. If they're not, you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Thank you so much, Aleeza, for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was amazing. I hope everybody who heard this conversation feels inspired to clean up their speech. You can sign up for your own detox from negative speech at cleanspeech.com/NJ. And if you're interested in Aleeza's new course, Become Your Own Matchmaker, you can find that in her Instagram bio at Aleeza Ben Shalom. Thank you so much for tuning in.